Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender, Season 1, Episode 4. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're going to focus on the Iroh and Zuko side of things first, but obviously we pick up with Aang and Iroh being in the prison together, and it's so interesting when you hear Iroh talk about like the beauty of like the Earth kingdoms, like construction, just Earthbenders, what they're able to make and what they're able to create in these unescapable prisons. But it's this whole conversation that ends up coming up about Zuko, how like in Aang's mind, he's like, oh, I know what kind of person Zuko is, because the fact of the matter is he left you behind and he ran, which is so interesting too, because like sadly those same like arrows are flung at him when it comes to why he's here now, present day, being like, oh, you ran away, and call him a coward. So there's interesting parallels there. But obviously Iroh tries to stick up for Zuko. It's like he's not things aren't so black and white, things aren't what you think they are, because it's like, oh, because like Zuko should come and save you, he owes you that much. But Iroh's like, no, I'm the one that owes him. And so we dive into kind of like more about Iroh's role in the war. Once again, Dragon of the West. And he's getting transported to a pit, but one of the guards there has personal beef with Iroh, because he's like, the city you attacked, he's like, when you attacked it, my brother died. You killed so many, like your assault was on the city was relentless. Your siege was 600 days, and it was unending, and so many lives lost. And this is a person who was a personal victim, and someone who suffered at the hand of Iroh, and he wants to make him suffer. Because in his mind, it's like, you firebenders, you're not human. You don't need what? Why firebenders need water or whatever? It's just Iroh having to come to face with the aftermath of a lot of what he's done, because he was even talking to Aang about like obviously what him and his brother, once again, him and Ozai do not see eye to eye on how this whole thing should be approached. But it's also like, and that's what I was kind of talking about before, because I can't remember all of Iroh's past. He is the way that he is now. He's the lovable, calm, collected person like amongst the Fire Nation, but he wasn't always. I mean, he even says like, I was a soldier. So it's like, how much was it like he's exactly like Ozai? Just the thing is, his experiences made him grow and change, whereas Ozai has basically stayed the same. Once again, I don't remember enough of Iroh's past, because we even brought up him having a son. I was like, I did not remember him having a kid, but that kid died. And especially when that Earthbender was telling him like, oh, you don't know what loss is. I see the lack of humanity in your eye, because Iroh had said, when we like, once again, I was a soldier, I did what I had to do, but he was like, no, you were a butcher, you were a monster. And for Iroh, it is the situation of war makes us see a side of ourselves we never thought possible. You know, that ugly side. It kind of basically, war makes a monster out of us, and so it's hard to look at that side of yourself. And he's like, oh, is that your way of kind of apologizing to me? And Iroh's like, I wasn't talking about what was it? He was saying like, I wasn't talking about me. I think he was kind of trying to talk to this guy like, if you want to cross that line, it's not going to let you go. Like, you're going to be haunted by the choices you make. Like, you might be filled with revenge and want to kill me, but that's not going to make you feel any better. In fact, it's going to haunt you. That anger, that hate consuming you, which kind of like parallels with Katara's conversation with Jet, where Jet's like, you betrayed me. We have to do whatever it takes. This is war. But for Katara, it's like, you helped me, yes, you helped me remind myself of my mom, but my mom was about living her life, not consumed with hate. You are so adamant about getting revenge and doing whatever it takes to win that you lost sight of, rather than fighting to protect the people you love, you were driven by hate instead of love. It's no longer about what you're fighting for and who you're fighting for. It's just about, let's get them, we gotta get them. Because, I mean, understandable, it's been 100-year reign of the Fire Nation oppressing every group, every nation, every person in the world. I mean, they're even oppressing their own people. So it's hard to, let that hate go. So I think Iroh obviously looks back in retrospective the things he did. It was only through loss that he ended up changing his approach, because when in his process of loss, he found something else to kind of hold on to that ended up being Zuko, but we'll get to that in a second. And when you don't have anything to kind of hold on to, that hate can consume you whole. But like after the Earthbender walked away saying like, "Oh, you have no humanity," you see it in Iroh's eyes, and we get the flashback to when his son died, and it's like, right, his son died, and because he died in battle, he died with honor, but because you lost your child, Iroh left the battle, and he will forever have a stain against him being labeled a coward. So it's not. That's why he's not also like. That's why him and Zuko are kind of two peas in the pod, because they're both the kind of quote unquote failures of the family. Whereas like Azula is doing everything she can to prove herself better than her failure of her brother, so on and so forth, right? But it's like all everyone can do is like, oh my god, like your son, he'll be honored. Even though I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry what happened, but don't worry, legend will always talk about him. Like it's not like I'm sorry for your loss, brother. He will, like, you said what you said and you moved on. And Zuko's saying the same thing, like, you sacrificed your devs in battle. But then he walks back and he's like, yeah, your son, my cousin, gave me this. And he said that basically it was like something a medal he had gotten for like his training as like a officer. And Zuko's like, when my studies weren't going the way I wanted him to, and father was super unhappy with it, he gave this to me, and he said like it was meant to be given to someone who will go off to do great things. Which I'm wondering, does that have the significance? I'm once again, no spoilers for future stuff, but I'm like, does that have the significance I think it does? Once again, it's one of those things where I'm like, that feels like that's scratching at the back of something, and I'm like, is that going to be like a book 3 thing that kind of circles back around? If you're familiar with book 3 goes, especially for Zuko's story, will that kind of be a tie-in there? Or does it tie into like something in book 2? He gets very close to someone in book 2, which are almost like, oh, is that going to be kind of a thing? But it's like, nope, that's not a thing. So, I mean, especially at the end of book 2. But I'm like, I don't remember, because I do feel like, I mean, currently, not less Iroh gave it back to him, but it's like, I feel like I remember that having even more significance. But like I said, I could be just, I'm once again, maybe all this stuff is blurring together in my head. So now I'm like incepting myself into believing this is something that happened from the original series, but it never did. I'm just like blurring the lines between what's happening in the live action with what happened in the original series, and there was no correlation, whatever the case may be. It was just beautiful moment of just like Zuko sitting beside his uncle, and just his uncle like trying to be so steadfast. He was sad. You could see the sadness in his eye, and just that single tear you see like dripping down his face. And luckily, well, Zuko, interestingly enough, was in this position where, right, he snuck in as a guard in the Earth Kingdom of Omashu, and he had 2 choices: go after the Avatar or go after Iroh, and he went after his uncle, and ultimately ends up saving him. It's kind of a badass Iroh, like, obviously still having the chains on from the cuff and like implementing that into his fire bending. Was pretty dope. And he split the boulder in half, and the guard was like, go ahead, do it. But Iroh's like, no, there's already been enough bloodshed, there's no more like reason to keep adding more death to it. And the guy tried to attack Iroh, and it's just his humanity is there. He feels bad. It's like, I took someone from you, and if we don't stop this, if we don't change, it will always be this. It'll be this back and forth, this tit for tat type of thing. I harmed you, you're trying to harm me. I hurt someone you love, someone I love got hurt. Like, it's just going to be a never-ending cycle, and he wants to do everything he can to break that cycle. That's also the purpose of the Avatar. The Avatar is the one person who can break this cycle of hate, this cycle of violence. So they ultimately get away, and we see the day Zuko 3 years ago was shipped off, and he was just meant to go on his own, but Iroh's like, no, I'm going to be here. He's like, I don't need a babysitter. He's like, okay, then a friend. And I think that's what's it's the beautiful nature of Iroh and Zuko's relationship. Once again, it's just he's been more of a father to Zuko than his own father has been, and it's just this beautiful thing of especially the live action showcasing in this in that scene, and in totality their story showcasing that when both of them were at their absolute lowest, they had someone there by their side. And I thought that was beautiful. And you can almost, like, Zuko wasn't going to let the tears like come down, but you never know. Like, I mean, that wound on his eye, he still had bandages, so it was still fresh at that time. So it could have came from the other eye and we just never saw it, or maybe it did happen and I just didn't notice it. But it's just, I just thought that was nice. It was Iroh's way to pay back his nephew, because it's like, right, I owe you so much. You were there for me and I want to be there for you. I thought it was beautiful at the very end of the episode. Zuko looks up and sees Appa in the air, and Iroh's like, "Oh, what do you see, Zuko?" And Zuko's like, "Nothing. Let's get you home." And it's just like, is that right now I'm not worried about the Avatar. Yes, he's everything, but also you are my everything too. You've kept me going. You've been by my side. Once again, there for him when his own father, when his own sister weren't there for them. And obviously we learn more about it because they've only scratched the surface, obviously, on Zuko's past. In a lot of ways, they've only scratched the surface. So we haven't even begun to fully explore everything. So there's still more story and background to tell on that front. So on the other side of things, we have Sokka confronting Sai, and we find out the truth. Like I said, I didn't remember anything about the story, so I was like, was it one thing? Was it? It's like, no, it turns out Jet was kind of a bad guy, but also a Sai. But once again, it's two sides of a similar coin of, just as Sai puts it, everyone doing whatever they can to survive. Because Sai was informing to the Fire Nation, but it's because they were threatening his son, and he's doing whatever he can to go by. He's like, right, I'm giving them tools and stuff, but nothing for war. But it's like, yeah, but especially in the Fire Nation's hands, Sokka's like, anything could end up being an implement, a tool of war in their hands, you know. So you have no idea how you've been helping them in the long run. And I get it, it's for the sake of your son. And he even tried to draw the parallel with Sokka. It's like, your dad, you would understand, your dad would understand. He's like, the fact is, your dad left so much on your shoulders at such a young age, you know? And it's just like, yeah, a parent wanting to do whatever it takes to protect their child. And it's like, but Sokka's like, yeah, my dad would never do what you did. I mean, especially considering what the Fire Nation has already taken from them in so many regards. Like, you know, just one thing at the top of the top list is Sokka and Katara's mom. But it's Tio that wants to help, because he's like, right, the Avatar is back and he's going to try and save the world, so it's up to us to actually fight too. Because Sai is still reluctant, and it's understandable. Once again, when the Fire Nation is ruled with such an iron fist, when they can threaten the little you have left in this world, when they've taken so much from so many people, that's the thing. They beat you down. They've stripped this world of their fighting, some people's fighting spirit, their hope. That's also what the importance of the Avatar, to inspire that fighting spirit, to inspire that hope in people. Katara and, well, first and foremost, Katara now has a little jug she's going to carry around for her water bending on the go, which I'm like, I do feel like I vaguely remember that. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of the benders, like the airbenders and the firebenders, have the benefit of kind of being able to bend anywhere for the most part. Like, water benders are probably the most limited, because you have to specifically be near some form of large amount of water, decent amount of water. Earthbenders, for the most part, are good, but, you know, even that can have its limitations unless you're a certain character. But yeah, you know, so it makes sense. And I was like, yeah, did she? I mean, I feel like I vaguely remember her carrying around the jug. It's also interesting because I was watching. I was like, oh yeah, like Gara with the jug, and I was like, well, yeah, the manga is older than the original Avatar, the Last Airbender. Because I'm like, this came out like 2000. The original series came out in 2005. That might have been around the time Naruto came to the U. No, I don't know. It's like the manga's definitely older, so the Gara reference would be an older reference, but it just felt weird to me to make a reference about Gara. And, you know, if you know nothing about Naruto, there's a character named Gara who has a large gourd of sand he keeps on his back. kind of for the similar purposes of having sand that he could use whenever he wants to, because essentially Gar is a bender. Anyway, tangents and all that aside, I wanted you to know my thought process. That just funny enough that like Gara was the first thing that came to my mind. But also Katara is learning more and more about her powers as she's not only being able to control water and use the water whip more, she's also learning to freeze it now. But either way, her and Sokka make their ways to these caverns, which are supposed to lead to an underground tunnel, and they run into some musicians where I'm like, are those minstrels like, because it's like the whole secret tunnel song. I'm like, that sounds so familiar, but I don't know if, once again, I don't know if I'm making stuff up in my head. If I'm continuously incepting myself, because I'm like, are they kind of like the Cabbage guy where they pop up from time to time, or is that just, I don't know. And I just like, they're pretty much this world's version of hippies. And they're like, oh man, it's good. And Sokka's actually kind of getting into it a little bit. He kind of felt embarrassed that he was so into it. They're like, no, these aren't the caves. Those are the caves. It's like, yeah, but anyone that goes in there is doomed. And singing a song, and it's like, they're doomed. It's like, they're so like happy. They did tell us the story about why Omashu is the name. It's about two lovers that were kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation. But was it Oma died, and Shu was so enraged that she fought, but instead of killing people, she ended up forming what is now the city Omashu, which is in reference, a partial reference to the love that her lover that died. It's also interesting we learned about the Badger Moles being the ones who the Earthbenders learned how to bend from, which we later on find out they are blind Earthbenders. And it's interesting, which I'm like, I didn't remember the Badger Mole thing, which I'm like, does that tie into said character later on? I was like, is there a correlation there? I mean, especially considering, like, I feel like there has to be. But also, it's like, I mean, if that's kind of rooted in what is earthbending, it's all connected regardless. Especially the whole conversation of they can't see, they dictate by feel, which out of any bending, earth is the most applicable for that. I mean, they all could be, but that one in particular, obviously being all about feel and a bending that's fully connected with that. I mean, they all are, but obviously earthbending has like a very special connection with like someone having no sight and just everything. I know. Obviously, I'm being so blatantly obvious about what I'm talking about without talking about it, but I'm doing a terrible, terrible job at it, so I do apologize. But Sokka and Katara, it's been building up for a while, but it kind of comes to a head now, because they had it out a little bit last episode, but he's kind of being like, oh, let me take charge. We can follow like the crystals on the wall, but she's like, stop treating me like a child. He's like, you're acting like one. You didn't see the traitor that Saya. It's like, you were hanging with a terrorist, and it's like, if Dad was here, and she's like, you're not Dad, and it's just, he knows he's not, and for him, it's just this complicated complex of, I want to be like Dad. A lot of responsibility was thrust on me at a young age, and I don't want to let Dad down. I don't want to let anyone down. I know I'm not Dad, but I'm trying my best. But even Katara apologizes, because they had the conversation of missing their grand's food, and it's like, will we ever taste it again? And it's like, yeah, we will. But even Sokka's like, I mean, I don't know how this is all going to play out. But later on, she apologizes. She even says like, Dad had it a little easier than you, because you had that handle, like you, like it is like you were responsible for the entire village. That the responsibility was kind of thrust upon you unfairly, and you had to shoulder that burden alone. It was up to you to kind of help look after everyone. That's not something Dad had to go through. You had it harder than him. So like I said, it's just, especially when Sokka had opened up about, Sai saying he could be an engineer, and it's just, he's like, yeah, my fighting skills and stuff, but it's just, and like I was talking about last episode, for the first time, he doesn't have to just be what someone else is kind of putting him in the position of. He could just be his own person. He can just do, like, he became a warrior because it was out of duty and responsibility, not necessarily out of want. He didn't make that choice. That choice was kind of made for him. So the engineering angle of the things could be, something where it's like, yeah, that's more of what I want, that I do have a passion for. I do have the skills for it. So, But yeah, they eventually run into the Badger moles because I love that reveal where it's like, wait, the tunnels are changing. How is this happening? I was like, is the place just all like? Is it almost like a? Uh, is it almost like a? Persona 3 and 4 dungeon where it's just like, yeah, the layout changes every single time you go in there type of thing, but it's like, no, it's because the Badger moles are using the tunnels and they are changing and moving stuff around. Once again, they are the original Earthbenders. But Katara and Sokka, their love is what finally got to him because it's like, oh, like these things respond to feelings because they can't see, and this is what helped Oma and Shu like navigate the tunnels was love. Like, you know, even in the like love can basically light the darkness. They respond to feelings and they point at Sokka and Katara in the right direction. So Paul's things there, and we'll obviously move over to Aang's side of things where he is finally able to meet the king of Omashu, and it's his good old buddy Boomy, which is why I've kept referencing, like, okay, Boomy's the thing. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's going to be coming up this episode because he was in the last episode. He just didn't have any lines of dialogue because he pops up like right near the end of the episode. But like I said, I saw trailers and stuff of him and Aang's fight, just like little bits, not the full thing, just little bits I'd seen previously. Because I've avoided like a lot of like the commercials and promos, and like I still think the only trailer I saw was the teaser trailer. I don't think I ever saw the full official trailer. And I also know there's a more recent trailer that came out because Netflix will usually drop like a trailer like fairly close to the release of the show or movie or whatever to put out the final trailer and whatnot. So either way, because I've also hinted to it in the past episodes where I was like, oh yeah, like Aang's lost everyone for the most part, and Boomy is that for the most part because Boomy's still alive and kicking and looking great for 100 and you'd assume 10 or 12. You assume he's around the same age as Aang. But I also kind of forgot. I knew he was a little kooky, but I actually kind of forgot how batshit crazy Boomy is. And it's like, how much of that's just Boomy being Boomy, and how much of that's just being alive for 100 years and your brain's kind of a little not firing on all cylinders. But it is kind of nice that they're kind of reunited, and it's like, oh, this isn't just an airbender, this is the Avatar, and they're sitting down for food, and he's making all these puns. But the conversation does get dead serious when Boomy's like, right, you weren't here. You got to sleep through 100 years. I was here for the day in, the day out, year after year, 100 years of the Fire Nation reigning and the death and destruction. And he kind of was trying to make this point to Aang about being the Avatar, being like, you will have to make impossible choices. And that was also a point that Jet was making towards Katara as well about the impossible choices. Boomy would use this example of, well, do you feed the soldiers or do you feed the citizens? It's like you are going to have to be put in those positions. It's like defending and blocking attacks and assaults and fighting back. It's just day in and day out for 100 years. Like, that is a lot, you know. And it's like, right, I had to live every second of that. You got to pass it by, which comes with its own pain. It's not like he got away scot-free, because he even admits, like, the feeling of, I wasn't there to help, maybe I could have done something, you know. And Boomy with his games, the whole rock candy situation. I feel like I remember there being a little more levity to Boomy and Ong. I'd say, oh my god, sorry, Aang. Oh god, I pulled an M. Night Shyamalan there. I'm so sorry, Jesus. Boomy and Aang's situation. I think I remember there being more levity to it. Like, I do remember it getting serious, but I thought I think I vaguely remember Boomy doing it all for a reason. He kind of was in this, but he was kind of like, he was trying to get a point across to Aang, but he was a lot more serious about it. Whereas in the original series, I feel like he was pushing Aang, sure, but there was a more levity into it, which this has it as well. But I don't know. I thought I vaguely remembered their interaction ending on a little more levity than it did. It does, but like I said, not to the extent I think it was in the series. The original series, sorry. he had challenged Aang to the final game and was trying to once again bring home so many points about what it means to be the Avatar, the sacrifices, the choices you will have to make. You know, it's like, right, he's like, all the things I've had to do just to save this one city, Aang, and you're going to have to save the entire world. You're going to have to choose between this and choose that. Who gets this and who gets that? Like, those choices are going to be in your hands. Once again, that's why I always stress, like, this series in particular really leans into the heaviness of this is all on the shoulders. Because there's so many shonen things that would teach you, like, oh my god, this is it's shonen main protagonist of, oh, you're like high school age or something like that. That's a lot of responsibility to be a hero. But it hammers it home that, yes, his naivety, like being young, he's still the 12-year-old kid. He hasn't grown enough. But I mean, he grows over that's the point of this adventure, is for him to grow and to learn, you know? And the reason why, like, obviously Boomy was bringing the place down and Aang was blocking the rubble above himself but also above Boomy. But Boomy's like, no, let it fall. You have to make a choice. If you let this crush me, you can win. That's how this works. These are the choices you have to make. Because, he's like, I had to make these choices on my own because you weren't there for not only the world, you weren't even there for me. And we were best buds. And ultimately, like, you're all alone. There's no one that's there with you. And luckily, Katara and Sokka show up to help Boomy, and it puts Aang in this situation. And obviously, Boomy calls him. I was like, hey, you cheated. He's like, no, I relied on my friends. You're right. I wasn't there for you, and I'm sorry. But the fact of the matter is, I'm here now, and I can't save the world on my own. That's why I have my friends. They will be the deciding factor. They will help me do this because I can't do it alone. Because it's like, right, you're still a child, and he's like, is that such a bad thing? Because he kept trying to hammer home the point to Boomy, like, that there's no way my friend, that lovable kid who loved to play and was kind of a silly person, like, he's still there somewhere deep inside. It also showcases, like, how Boomy became so jaded. It's like, right, Jet may, like, disagree with a lot of his decisions, but it's like, you're not in my position. I have hard choices to make. I fought so hard to protect this kingdom for, like, so many years, and it's like, yeah, it might be seen as senile or kind of crazy, which that's just kind of a little of Boomy's personality, but also mixed with him just being older and senile and crazy, so. But ultimately, the Fire Nation has people on its way because Sai ended up telling the Earth Kingdom, told Omashu about it, and and they're prepared. In fact, they ended up rounding up a lot of those spies. But the problem is that there's still reinforcements on the way. But they're like, no, we got this. We're going to guard this place. You've got a more important mission out there to go, Aang. And so, obviously, him and Boomy get to, very much like the original series, get to ride on the slides and enjoy it. And we get one more My Cabbages. We probably won't get that at all. It'd be neat if they kind of did it, but it probably, if it was, I don't think it's going to be the continuous gag like it was in the original series. That might be all we get, but who knows what the future holds, right? Some very, very interesting developments. I'm curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.